Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Imagine you're listening to your favorite Scary Stories podcast, and you're hearing a bunch of stories about haunted places, haunted museums, haunted flower shops, and then suddenly, bam, chupacabra story. Well, sorry people, because that's what's about to happen to you. Not that you're about to get eaten by a chupacabra or anything, but I'm going to share a random assortment of scary work stories with you, featuring haunted places and one particular scary chupacabra encounter. Enjoy. Before we begin, remember to send me your scary true work stories at eeriecast.com/submit and help us grow by following and reviewing Tales from the Break Room on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And would you like a chance to help me regrow the lost hairs on my balding head? Well, the demons tell me for every pre-order of my upcoming new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon or at creepycampfirestories.com, they'll let me have exactly one hair follicle back. And I know we probably need a New York Times bestseller on our hands before I see much progress, but hey, you'll be helping a brother out. That's Creepy Campfire Stories by Darkness Prevails. Thank you. Now, these are Tales from the Break Room. Museum Hauntings from Yangyam Chicken. I want to preface this by saying that I've always believed in the paranormal. Growing up, I loved hearing and reading scary stories, so it bummed me a little bit that I had no concrete experience of the paranormal so far. Sure, I had weird things happen to me, like seeing something not really there in the corner of my eye, or feeling unsettled in certain places, but I could always chalk it up to paranoia. That was until a series of scary things finally happened to me. Around 6 years ago, before COVID hit, I got into a job working clerical for my alma mater's Center for Cultural Affairs. See, the department has 3 cultural performing groups that it handles: a marching band, a chorale, and a dance troupe. Since all the members are either students or trainers who only work part-time, and our director is mostly busy with other projects, I was almost always alone in the office. Our place was located a long ways outside of the university premises, in this old house that was once a privately owned family home back around World War II, before the owners migrated elsewhere. The property was then bought by the university when it was just a newly established school, and was turned into an elementary school back in the 60s. When the elementary department got relocated to its current building in the main campus, the house got abandoned for more than a decade before it was refurbished and was made into a mini museum that our department also manages. Now, to understand the things that happened more, I need to roughly tell you the house's layout. It was an old colonial-style 2-story house made from wooden materials with huge windows that open out circling both levels. On the first floor we have the main hall, in which we mostly hold our external exhibits. Artists usually rent the space to hold their personal shows. To the left side of the house, there is a doorway that leads to a small kitchen and dining area, in which the comfort rooms are also located. To the right of the main hall is a wooden staircase that leads to the second floor, in which another exhibit area is situated alongside our office. At the back area of the second floor is a door to the emergency staircase that leads out and down to the house. Nothing really happened when I first started working there, but every time I got introduced to a colleague at the university campus, they would always ask me if I've ever experienced anything yet in the house. It bothered me at the time, because it wasn't only 1 or 2 people saying that to me, but almost everyone who learned I worked in the museum has asked me the same exact question. But since I haven't noticed anything weird, I shrugged it all off and eventually forgot about it. Until things did start happening. My first encounter happened around a month after I got started. It was closing time, and the sky was starting to get dark. I've closed every window and door in the house, and I was on my way to go out the front door when I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. So I went back inside the darkening premises without bothering to turn on the lights, since I could still see a bit, and I proceeded into one of the bathrooms. Now, the bathroom was laid out so when you open the very creaky door, the toilet is directly in front of you, with a sink on the right side. I went into the small space and locked the door out of habit. I turned my back from the door to lift the lid of the toilet, and turned again to sit down only to face a very widely opened door. Now, as I said earlier, that bathroom door was so creaky, I could even hear it opening and closing on the second floor every time someone used it. But to my horror, I never heard a single peep at the time. I was also very sure I locked the door, like how I lock every bathroom door I've ever entered in my life. But this was wide open. In my panic, I blurted out loud, can I just use the bathroom real quick? Promise I'll leave as soon as I'm finished." I closed the door, did my business, and quickly fled out the house without looking back, in fear of what I might see. After that day, weird things started to occasionally happen to me. I'd hear the wooden floors creaking like someone else was walking around the premises, even when I'm alone in the house. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the stairs, like someone was coming up, only to find no one in sight when I went to check it out. One time when I was sweeping the floor, this old huge picture frame on one of the walls started to vibrate out of nowhere. At first I thought maybe I somehow brushed it while cleaning, but seeing how heavy the thing was, it was impossible for it to vibrate unless I shake it hard. The next thing I thought was that maybe a mild earthquake happened, but none of the other frames surrounding the hall moved. Just that one frame. The most persistent of them all, though, is the unshakable feeling that I'm never alone in that house. Like someone or something was always there, watching and observing. Now, after a few months of this, I got used to it. I never saw anything, or was never harmed in any way, and the weird instances weren't constant enough to cause concern, so I learned to ignore it. That was until something happened that scared me crapless. I forgot to mention at the start of this, but we have a security station near the gate of the premises, a little outside the house but still within the museum grounds. This one time I was so bored, I went to hang out with the guard on duty. She was a sweet lady in her late 50s, and we always got along well. While talking, she confessed something that made the hairs on my arm stand on end. Now, as I mentioned, the house has these huge windows circling both floors, and when you're at the right distance from them, you can be seen through it from the ground. She told me that the day before she was sitting down on her station writing on the logbook, when she mindlessly looked up to the second floor of the house and saw me in a white dress walking from one end of the windows to the other. Not even a minute later, she heard me laughing on the ground floor of the museum. So she looked down, and there I was, talking to one of the part-time staff visiting that day. I forgot what I was wearing at the time, but it wasn't a dress, and it was most definitely not white. Shocked, she looked up again, but the person she saw upstairs was nowhere to be found. She said she immediately made the sign of the cross and uttered a quick prayer. Hearing that, I got so scared that my paranoia shot so high up I was constantly looking over my shoulder for the next few days. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, COVID hit, and everything went on lockdown, so we worked remotely for months. When we were permitted to work face-to-face again, I was reassigned to another department that was located inside the main campus, so I never went back to that haunted museum since. And I don't think I ever will. Not after learning that the entity residing there took on my face. Summer of the Chupacabra. From W.W. Winfrey. I grew up on our family farm in Chihuahua, about 2 hours south of Ciudad Juarez. It wasn't large by commercial standards, but to us children it seemed to stretch forever. 20 acres of hard work and family history. My father, Rogelio, inherited the land from his father, who had built the modest adobe house where I spent my childhood with my parents, my older brother Ernesto, and my younger sister Dulce. Our lives revolved around the seasons. We grew corn, beans, and chilies primarily, with a small orchard of peach and apple trees near the house. We also kept chickens, goats, and a few cattle that grazed in the eastern field. My earliest memories are of trailing behind my mother, Valentina, as she harvested vegetables, my small hands learning to test for ripeness, and my eyes watching for pests. By the time I was 12, I was expected to work alongside everyone else. Our house sat at the northern edge of our property, a single-story structure with thick walls that kept us cool in summer and trapped the heat from our wood stove in winter. Behind the house stood my father's workshop and the chicken coop. To the west lay the main fields, to the south the orchard, and to the east the grazing land and an old barn. Beyond our boundaries to the north stretched the land of the Morales family, who we rarely saw, and to the south, untamed desert scrubland that eventually rose into foothills. I was 15 during the summer that changed everything, the summer of 2006. That year had been particularly dry, and we had been working twice as hard to keep our crops from failing. Perhaps it was the drought that drove it to our farm. Perhaps it was something else entirely. Whatever the reason, that was the summer our peaceful existence was shattered by what my abuela Imelda would eventually insist was a chupacabra. The first strange occurrence happened in early June. It wasn't dramatic, just unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. I had gone to collect eggs from the chicken coop early one morning. Usually, the chickens would be clucking and bustling about, but that morning they were silent and huddled in the corner of the coop, trembling. I assumed a coyote or fox had been prowling nearby and frightened them. But when I checked around the coop, I found no tracks, only a strange, sweet-sour odor, like rotting fruit mixed with copper. The chickens refused to leave the coop all day, and we gathered half our usual number of eggs. My father examined the area carefully, but found nothing conclusive. He suggested it might be a mountain lion passing through, though he seemed puzzled by the lack of tracks. That night, he loaded his old rifle and kept it by the door, just in case. Life continued normally for about 2 weeks. The incident with the chickens wasn't forgotten, but it faded beneath the constant demands of farm work. Then came the second incident, the minor one that we almost dismissed, but that later took on new significance. One morning, my brother Ernesto noticed that someone had been in the orchard overnight. Several peaches had been picked from various trees, not in clusters as a human would harvest, but individual fruits selected apparently at random throughout the orchard. What made it strange was that there were no footprints, and some of the chosen peaches had been from the highest branches that even my father struggled to reach without a ladder. Ernesto asked if I had been sneaking fruit. I hadn't. None of us had. My father wondered if the Morales children had come onto our property, though it seemed unlikely. When I accompanied my mother to their farm to ask, Senora Morales seemed offended at the suggestion and assured us that her children had been at home all night. On our walk back, my mother confided that she didn't believe it was children at all. She had found 3 of the stolen peaches discarded near the edge of the property, each with just a single, unusual bite taken out of it. She showed me one she had brought along. The bite wasn't from human teeth. It looked more like a puncture, with 2 prominent holes surrounded by smaller marks. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The windows in my room faced the orchard, and I kept imagining shapes moving between the trees. The moonlight cast strange shadows, and every rustling leaf seemed to hide something watching and waiting. I finally fell asleep with my blanket pulled over my head, something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. The third incident occurred in mid-July, and there was no dismissing it as anything ordinary. We kept 10 goats at that time, including 2 new kids born that spring. They were kept in a pen adjacent to the barn at night, with access to the eastern pasture during the day. One morning, my father went to let them out as usual and found the gate to their pen hanging open. Inside, 7 of the goats were huddled in the corner, making distressed sounds I had never heard before, a high-pitched whine that raised the hair on my arms. 3 goats were missing, including one of the kids. My father called for Ernesto, and they set out to search the property, while my mother tried to calm the remaining animals. I stayed with her, and that's when we noticed the blood. Not a lot, just small, dark droplets leading from the pen toward the southern boundary of our farm, where the desert began. I asked my mother what could have happened. She said she wasn't sure, but her face had gone pale, and she made the sign of the cross when she thought I wasn't looking. My father and Ernesto returned mid-afternoon, grim-faced and exhausted. They had found the 3 goats almost a mile into the desert, or rather, they had found what remained of them. I wasn't allowed to see, but I overheard my father telling my mother that they had been drained of blood, with the same paired puncture wounds we had seen on the peaches, but larger and more numerous. There were no signs of the bodies being eaten, just systematically drained. The corpses were completely dry. That night, we locked all the animals into the barn, even the chickens. My father and Ernesto took turns keeping watch from the porch with the rifle. I watched from my window as they passed a thermos of coffee between them, their faces illuminated briefly when they lit cigarettes, a habit my father had quit years before, but resumed that night. The next day, my father drove into town and returned with heavy chains and better locks for all the outbuildings. He also brought back Tio Mateo, my mother's brother who worked as a ranger in the nearby national park. My uncle had experience with predators and knew the local wildlife better than anyone. He examined the remaining evidence, the strange tracks my father had found near the goat pen, the peculiar pattern of the wounds as my father described them. I sat on the porch steps, pretending to shell peas while listening to their conversation. My uncle said he had never seen an animal kill like this, not in 20 years of working in the wilderness. Mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, they killed to eat. This was something else. He mentioned that there had been similar incidents reported further south, near his park. Livestock killed, drained of blood, always with the same distinctive wounds. Some of the local ranchers were saying it was a chupacabra. My father laughed, though the sound held no humor. He said those were just stories to frighten children. My uncle didn't argue, but he didn't laugh either. He stayed with us that night, and the 2 men sat up with their rifles and a bottle of tequila between them. For almost 2 weeks, nothing happened. The heightened vigilance continued, but as days passed without incident, we began to relax slightly. My abuela Imelda arrived for her annual summer visit, bringing with her small cloth bags of herbs and salt that she hung over every doorway, despite my father's protests. She took one look at the nervous animals and declared that a chupacabra had marked our farm as its territory. My father told her not to fill our heads with superstition, but she ignored him and continued placing her protective herbs. The 4th incident, the one that would haunt my dreams for years, happened during a new moon in early August, when the night was as dark as it ever got. I had been sleeping fitfully in the summer heat when a sound woke me. A scratching at my window, like branches in the wind, except there was no wind that night, and no trees grew close enough to touch the house. I lay frozen in my bed, listening as the scratching moved slowly across the glass. Then it stopped, and I heard another sound, a soft rhythmic hissing, almost like labored breathing. Against every instinct screaming at me to hide under my covers, I turned my head toward the window. The darkness outside was nearly complete, but as my eyes adjusted, I could make out a shape, darker than the night around it, pressed against my window. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a medium dog, but its proportions were all wrong. Its head seemed too big for its body, with a pointed snout or beak. What looked like spines ran down its back, and its limbs were long and thin, ending in what appeared to be claws that were dragging slowly across my window glass. I couldn't see its eyes until it moved its head slightly, and then I wished I hadn't. They caught what little ambient light there was, glowing a dull red like dying embers. The creature remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, as if aware I was watching it, then suddenly dropped from sight. I finally found my voice and screamed. My parents and Ernesto came running, and through gasping sobs I told them what I had seen. My father checked outside but found nothing except strange three-toed prints in the soft earth beneath my window. Prints that seemed to disappear several feet away, as if the creature had simply vanished or taken flight. My abuela Imelda took charge then. She moved my mattress to the main room, where I would sleep for the remainder of the summer. She burned sage and copal in every room and placed bowls of vinegar on all the windowsills, saying that chupacabras hated the smell. My father no longer argued with her. That night, I heard him and my uncle discussing reinforcing all the windows with metal screens. The final and most terrifying incident occurred 3 nights later. We were all sleeping in the main room by then. My parents on their bed moved from their bedroom, Ernesto on the old couch, Dulce and I on our mattresses on the floor, and Abuela Imelda in her rocking chair, refusing to sleep. My uncle Mateo kept watch on the porch. I woke to the sound of our cattle bellowing in terror. My father and uncle grabbed their rifles and ran outside, while my mother blocked the doorway to prevent us children from following. Through the windows, we could see the beams of their flashlights sweeping across the property toward the eastern field. Then came a sound I will never forget, a high-pitched shriek that was neither animal nor human, echoing across our land. It was followed by shouts from my father and uncle, the crack of a rifle shot, and then silence. We waited in terrified suspense until they returned nearly an hour later. My father's shirt was torn and bloodied from a cut on his arm. My uncle looked shaken, his usual calm demeanor completely gone. When my mother asked what happened, my father simply shook his head and said they needed to call the authorities in the morning. It wasn't until years later that my uncle finally told me what they had seen. They had arrived at the cattle pen to find one of our cows on the ground, already dead, with the same wounds as the goats. As they examined it, movement caught their attention. In the beam of their flashlights, not 20 feet away, stood a creature like nothing they had ever seen. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but was the size of a large dog. Its skin was gray and hairless, with what looked like spines or quills along its back. Its head was oversized with an elongated jaw filled with needle-like teeth, and its eyes reflected their flashlight beams like pools of blood. Most disturbing were its front limbs, too long for its body, ending in 3-fingered hands with curved claws dripping with dark liquid. When their lights hit it, the creature shrieked and leaped, not away, but toward them. My uncle fired, and the creature veered off, disappearing into the darkness at a speed that seemed impossible. They tracked it to the southern boundary, where its prints simply ended in the middle of open ground, as if it had vanished or taken flight. The authorities came the next day, but they called it an animal attack, probably a diseased coyote or feral dog. They took statements and left, clearly dismissing my family's account of what we had seen and experienced. We lost no more animals that summer. My abuela's herbs remained hanging in every doorway, and my father installed metal screens over all the windows. When September came, I returned to school, carrying the secret knowledge that there are things in this world that defy explanation. I am 34 now, with children of my own. We live in the city, far from my parents' farm, which they eventually sold 5 years after that summer. Sometimes, on particularly dark nights, I wake to the sound of scratching at my window, only to find nothing there, and I always sleep with my windows locked and curtains drawn. Some people say the chupacabra is just a myth, a story created to explain the mundane. Perhaps they're right, but I know what I saw that summer, what my family experienced, and on nights when the moon is new and the darkness seems alive, I wonder if it's still out there, searching for sustenance, moving silently through the desert night. I still don't know what it was with certainty, but I do know this. I will never forget the summer the chupacabra came to our farm. Student, old man, and room with the brown door. From White Monster. I am a third-year medical student, and I want to share my story with you. First of all, I want to say that until this point in my life, I never did believe in supernatural stuff, like monsters or werewolves or skinwalkers. I considered myself a man of logic, and this stuff just didn't fit common sense. On the other hand, my good friend, actually my best friend, Jan, was another story. You see, he always loved and naturally believed in supernatural stuff. But 2 years ago, just when I returned to our hometown after finishing my first year of medical school, he started to act weird and talking nonsense. He would always have some conspiracy theories from time to time, but this was different. You see, unlike me, he didn't know which college to enroll in, so he got a job instead. His family helped him get a job in a company called Certus Surveillance, which deals with the installation of video surveillance in various places. But here's where things get strange. After my return, Jan and I went out for a cup of coffee to catch up. Of course, we were talking during the year while I was away, but virtual chat and communication can't replace real-life hanging out. Am I right? It was during that meeting when he started to talk about a bunch of weird stuff. He said the company owner, Miles, who hired him, isn't the nice guy he seems. He said that in his office he has some kind of red door. What kind of red door? I asked him, a little bit confused. He then told me that Miles had one rule, and that was not to go in that room. But curiosity got the better of him, and one day when Miles wasn't in his office, he entered the room and claims to have encountered some kind of demon inside. He added that he saw a bunch of weird symbols and blood inside that room too. Naturally, I started to laugh, thinking he was joking with me. But then I looked right into his eyes, and all I saw was pure fear. Well, he was my friend, so I wanted to believe him. But the story seemed just too unrealistic. I mean, a guy, an owner of a video surveillance company, basically surrounded by cameras, has a demon in his office? In the room with the red door? It seems like a bad joke if you ask me. Jan was pissed off because I didn't believe him, but he said he would get proof of the things he claimed. 2 years went by after our conversation, and every time we talked after that, Jan would bring up some new theories about things he saw. It didn't bother me. I just thought Jan was getting a little obsessed with it. But recently, I had my own experience with stuff I just can't explain. With stuff that made me a believer. I already mentioned that I am a third-year medical student. Well, my story is very simple. Ever since I can remember, I've wanted to be a doctor. I think it's my grandmother's fault. You see, she was a nurse, and would always tell me interesting stories that happened to her in the hospital. She would also teach me the names of bones and different body parts in Latin. Either way, by the time I started high school, I knew my true and only path was medicine. Let me tell you, medical school is no joke. It was intense from day one. The first year was especially brutal. Many students call the first year the anatomy year, because it's the main subject of the first year and very hard to pass. I spent hours and hours and hours studying all the muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. But in the end, my hard work combined with my grandmother's fundamentals helped me get an A in anatomy. Getting an A in anatomy also gives you an opportunity to work in a dissection hall as an assistant. This job was reserved for top students, a way to sharpen our skills while earning some extra cash to help with student life. I live as a subtenant near a tram station, so I could get to my college in 40 minutes at worst. I accepted this job without hesitation. The man lending me an apartment was an older gentleman. We'll call him Mr. Healthy. Mr. Healthy was the type of guy that would constantly complain about everything, especially my lifestyle. You see, Mr. Healthy was allergic to unhealthy food, especially greasy food. During my late-night studies, I would often go out to grab a quick slice of pizza, which, naturally, Mr. Healthy didn't like. He wasn't a fan of my cleaning either, but he was renting the apartment for a very good price, and it was, as I said, in a pretty good location. So I just ignored him for most of the time. And, from time to time, he would bring me his healthy vegetable lunch, which I guess was nice of him. My role as an assistant was to assist first-year students during their anatomy practicals, guiding them through the maze of muscles and nerves and vessels. I would demonstrate proper dissection techniques, explain anatomical structures in detail, and answer their questions. It was fulfilling work, both for my knowledge and my wallet. The dissection hall was located in an old building next to the college. In order to enter the dissection hall, you would need to pass through old brown wooden doors. Those doors were so massive and heavy that opening them was a little workout for the students. I remember the first time I saw those brown doors. Their brown paint was worn and chipped from years of use, and the sound they made. Those doors groaned like a wounded animal whenever you opened or closed them. Behind those doors was the dissection hall. The dissection hall itself was an eerie place. The cold, sterile air clung to you whenever you were in there, and the faint, sharp scent of formaldehyde always seemed to follow you home. The room had large metal tables, each fitted with a drainage system, and cabinets filled with preserved specimens. Let's just say you wouldn't like to be in there alone at night. I wasn't working alone in the dissection hall. I worked under, let's call him Mr. B, a seasoned anatomy instructor who had been at the university for years. Mr. B was a strange man, don't get me wrong. Mr. B was brilliant and deeply knowledgeable, but also very odd. I always felt strange vibes when I was near him. You know, like the ones that send chills down your spine. He rarely smiled, and his gaze lingered too long on things, be it students or cadavers, or even me. Once I caught him whispering to a preserved hand in a specimen jar, but I quickly brushed it off, linking it with my lack of sleep. Despite that, I admired him. He taught me dissection techniques that weren't even in textbooks, showing me tricks to reveal delicate nerve branches or hidden muscle layers. He made anatomy feel like an art form, and for that I respected him deeply. But on the other hand, his approach to dissection seemed a little weird. I'm not quick to judge, but getting so passionate about cutting dead bodies seems a little weird to me. Mr. Healthy, whom I would talk to from time to time, had a theory about Mr. B. You see, Mr. Healthy would start, You said Mr. B is a divorced man. Well, loneliness can drive a man insane. Maybe he's just lonely, and anatomy is his escape from harsh reality. So listen to me, young man. Find a girl as soon as possible and marry her, understand? Here he goes again with his life advice, I thought. But, on the other hand, Mr. Healthy had a point. Mr. B was a divorced man pushing his 40s with no children. God knows if he had friends outside of work. Maybe anatomy and those dead bodies were his escape from real-life problems. Unfortunately for me, the strange vibes coming off Mr. B proved to be correct. You see, I wasn't always studying at my apartment. I would occasionally stay at my college's library. It had very comfy chairs, and I could use all sorts of books that they don't let students borrow, because they're rare and expensive. One could argue that in these modern days you can find everything you need on the internet, or just ask AI. But I am a bit of a bookworm. I like reading books and studying from scripts, so the library was my go-to place. One evening, I stayed late in the library. I had an important test in pathology coming, and I wanted to be prepared. After I finally finished studying, I quickly got my stuff and left the college. But just as I was passing the old building with the dissection hall, I noticed that lights were on inside. Strange. What is Mr. B doing so late in there? Or is it just the janitor cleaning? I thought to myself. I was already starting to walk again to the tram station, located near the college, when curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. While I was approaching the building, I thought that Mr. B was probably just preparing the dissection hall for tomorrow's lessons, maybe organizing specimens, so I wasn't nervous about checking things out. As I entered the building, I noticed that those heavy brown doors leading into the dissection hall were slightly open, and there was a sound coming out of the dissection hall. I heard wet, squelching noises, like someone chewing on something thick and juicy. Curious to see what was going on, I approached the door, leaned closer, and placed my ear against the door. The sound was unmistakable. Those were flesh-tearing and eating noises, with occasional slurping sounds. I should have walked away. Every atom in my body was telling me just to get out of the building and pretend this had not happened. But we people are interesting beings. We are prepared to do almost anything just to satisfy our needs. In my case, my big curiosity. By this time, you can guess what I did. I peeked through a slightly open door, and what I saw behind those brown doors will haunt me for the rest of my life, and possibly even after. You see, what I saw was Mr. B crouching over one of the cadavers. In his hands, Mr. B was holding a part of a human liver. He started stuffing it into his mouth and eating it like there was no tomorrow. It seemed like he would start choking on it at any moment. His face was covered in blood and other bodily fluids. Another thing I noticed was his eyes. They lost all color and looked more gray, and his pupils were either extremely dilated or just gone, replaced by pure gray. And I swear then that his teeth even looked sharper than they should be. He looked like a starving animal, grunting and snorting between bites. The corpse on the table, the one I had helped prepare just a few days earlier, was mutilated beyond recognition. The ribs were cracked open and organs lay scattered on the steel tray beside him. For the first few moments, I just stood there, completely frozen. I knew I had to run as far as possible from that place, but I can't explain what happened at that moment. I felt like fear took away my legs. I started breathing heavily, My legs started to shake as I could feel sweat dripping down my forehead. At that moment, I probably leaned too hard on the door, and the door creaked. A split second after that, Mr. B's head snapped towards me. I quickly hid behind the door, praying that I had not been seen. A few seconds after that, I heard him walking towards the door. I immediately started to run towards the exit of the old building and towards the tram station. Perhaps God was watching over me, because just as I reached the tram station, a tram arrived, and I entered. As the doors of the tram closed, I noticed a human-like shadow standing a few feet away from the tram station. As soon as I got off the tram, I started running, and I didn't stop until I reached my apartment. My heart was pounding so fast, I slammed the door shut and bolted every lock. I stood in the silence for what felt like hours before I finally calmed down. He couldn't have followed me. The tram is much too fast. I should be safe. He doesn't know where I live, I thought to myself. At that moment, Mr. Healthy came out of his room. "Dear boy, you finally came. Where were you? What happened to you? You look terrible." Just as I was going to tell him what I saw, someone had started to pound heavily on the door. I peeked through the peephole, and there he was. He almost looked like a zombie out there. Mr. B's body was covered in blood and parts of what I presumed were organ leftovers. "Who is it?" Mr. Healthy asked me. "Step back and call the police. There's no time," I shouted at him. Perhaps it was the tone of my voice or maybe the pure fear in my eyes, but Mr. Healthy didn't even try to complain, and he did what I asked. The pounding on the door stopped after about 5 minutes, and the police showed up quickly after that. They searched the university and questioned faculty, but Mr. B by then had disappeared without a trace. No one had seen him since that night. The dissection hall was closed for weeks afterward, and rumors spread among the students, though no one seemed to know the truth. The university quietly claimed Mr. B had left due to personal reasons. For weeks I was shocked, trying to logically explain what happened that night. Even Mr. Healthy wasn't easy. He even changed the lock on the door. I couldn't sleep for days, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. B again, devouring human flesh. This experience made me realize sometimes there are things out there that you can't explain, not with logic. Maybe Jan was right. Maybe he really did have an encounter with a demon. Maybe I'll give him a call. Haunted Flower Shop, from Dodoko 9. I've worked at a small local flower shop for a bit over a year now. I work there with my boyfriend Sebastian and his mom Elizabeth. He is at the register most of the time, greeting customers and helping them with what they need, while I work in the back. Elizabeth, who is the owner of the shop, is the one who deals with the annoying and boring stuff, like documentation and such. Unless Sebastian needs help with something, I'm in the back making bouquets, taking care of the flowers and plants, and handling special requests when we occasionally get them. For the first time in my life, I enjoy working and look forward to waking up every day and clocking in. I like taking care of flowers. I love the different smells that surround me throughout the day, and on top of that, I get to work with the people I love. A couple of months ago, however, I noticed something strange in the shop. When I would walk through the front of the shop and open the door to get to the back section, there would always be a certain smell that would linger there for a couple of seconds, just long enough for you to notice, before disappearing. Now, I know that smells in a flower shop are a no-brainer. But trust me when I say that this one was really weird. After noticing it a few times, I managed to make out what it was. Balloon flower, or Platycedon grandiflorus, if you want to be fancy about it. They're a type of flower that comes in a few different colors, mostly blue, purple, and white. They don't have a very notable smell unless you crush the petals. And even then, the scent is very mild. So that's why it took me a while to pinpoint them. But once it popped into my head, I was sure of it. Since they're widely available, we too naturally have them. Near the very end of the back section sit a couple of rows of white balloon flowers, mostly bought for flower beds and rock gardens because of their unique shape. I pinpointed the smell, but there still wasn't an explanation as to why I was smelling them all the way here. I didn't think much of it, however. It was more of a mental note than anything else at the time. Over the next few weeks, though, I began to notice stranger things. I would feel a sudden chill in the air for a moment or two, would occasionally smell rot or decay, and overall, the whole vibe felt off. I noticed Sebastian looking weirded out too, and after talking to him, he told me even more strange things. Supposedly, he would often, at least a few times a day, catch the whiff of something burning from the back. At first, he always opened the door to check, but after a week of it happening, he began to ignore it. I was back there working after all, so if something was burning, I or Elizabeth would react before him, he reasoned. Things took a turn for the worse after that. Not just for our mental health, but for the business too. Soon, some of the flowers at the end of the back section and the displays at the very front of the shop began to rot and wither away, and unnaturally quickly too. Elizabeth would water the plants and pots at the front when she would come in first thing in the morning, and by the time Sebastian got everything ready and opened with the shop, some of the flowers would already be dying. I would leave for a break, and the flowers I was working on would look sickly and depressing. Elizabeth would start checking the flowers herself, looking at the buds, the soil, the boxes they arrived in, everything. But no matter how hard she looked, there would always be no traces of anything wrong with the flowers. Understandably, she too began to feel a certain type of way towards all this. The smells also got worse and more intense, and often a part of the shop would feel like someone opened a window during a heavy snowstorm with how cold it felt. But by far the creepiest thing was when Sebastian told me he thinks he's hearing someone talking. He said he would hear a hushed voice when the store was quiet. He described it as a mindless, erratic whispering, faint enough to be completely overshadowed by any other sound in the shop. But he swears he heard it, still hears it. Now, despite being a fully grown man, I was seriously starting to get freaked out. My mind was working against me as it picked up all the pieces of weirdness and made up horror after horror of what could be happening to us or to the shop. Elizabeth was also noticeably quite shaken up. Despite swatting away any and all topics of the supernatural with a laid-back, unserious remark and past conversations with us, Elizabeth was, in truth, deeply aware of what lurked beyond the veil, you could say. A fact that became even more obvious when one day Sebastian and I entered the shop, only to find it decorated with every kind of spirit-warding technique in the book. Different kinds of black and purple and white crystals accompanied the flower pots on the windows and the front of the shop. Paper sigils and chants plastered on the wooden coffered ceiling. Rosemary and thyme were hanging from every spot they could, and the back portion of the shop was decorated with some kind of cloth balls that were around every corner. Sebastian protested weakly, saying that this was stupid and overkill. But his words didn't have any bite to them. He probably secretly wished it would help somehow. And I felt the same way. And it did work. I don't know how or why, but ever since then the place returned to its old self again. No more weird smells, no more cold spots, no whispering, nothing. As I said in the beginning, this all took place a couple of months ago. And so far afterward, everything is going swimmingly. I just hope it continues like this. Lone Stretch of Lost Roads. From Rubber Duck. It's me, a truck driver from extremely rural Virginia. I recently got asked to help the post office of Pounding Mill to help deliver some of their heavier packages, and the boss cleared the job. Guess who was fortunate enough to do it? Me. Yeah, me. Who definitely hadn't been busy doing absolutely nothing in the depot, twiddling my thumbs and waiting for anything to come in from dispatch. Gizmo was safely in my cab, probably sleeping away as he usually does when it comes to these late night into early day shifts. I liked this time of night. It was silent except for the crickets, owls, and bats. The melody of the night had always been my favorite, a relaxing backtrack to the lonely roads that wound through those mountains. Fireflies had been out tonight, making my trip to work absolutely beautiful, as they lit up the rivers and the woods that stretched far beyond our little towns. The temperate summer wind had been rushing through an open window not far from me, adding to my relaxation, before I seemed to have hexed myself and the boss yelled my name from his office telling me this great news. I found myself whisked away to the local post office, courtesy of my lovely boss. I say that with all the sarcasm in the world, as he was a grouchy old man. I'd left Gizmo in the cab. He had food, water, and his cat box, so he was fine until I got back. That old cat hardly ever noticed me being gone these days anyway. I headed into the post office, taking a set of keys that had been left out for me, and I climbed into the well-used postal truck that they left everything in. I was used to these small tasks sometimes. Being such a small town, you tend to help everywhere you're told to. I sat in the parking lot, taking up my phone. I needed the GPS as most of the packages belonged to roads up the mountain paths, where people hardly ever dwelled. I had packages for a great deal of the outskirts, and those side streets had always tripped me up with their disuse and me not having a reason to go down them. The last time I'd set foot on one of those roads was a couple years back, when I went to help with a landslide that trapped an elderly woman in her home. I set myself up, GPS at the ready and a list of addresses sitting in the chair next to me. I was already tired, as Gizmo had demanded me to play with him most of the day, or suffer the wrath of his mighty kitty fury. I was only awake now thanks to the godsend that was Red Bull, a pipeline punch monster, and a 5-hour energy. I was wide awake. I knew I would have one heck of a crash later, but I prayed it was after I got this mess sorted. I had an extra energy drink, so I figured it wouldn't be too hard to offset the burnout. But you never know. I headed out to my first destination, which was in town, thankfully. I saw the occasional newspaper thrower, but nobody else was on the streets this early in the morning. My first drop-off was uneventful, as were the others in town, although I did get a certain eyeful from a beautiful woman. Can't blame a guy for looking at something gorgeous, can you? I'd reached the point where all the deliveries were now on the outskirts. My trusty GPS led me down winding roads, and at least there were roads. Most were dirt paths covered with years of leaves. Most of these houses weren't as well taken care of, since they were out in the middle of BFE. I didn't hold much thought about these until I ended up on a small road named Raven's Nest. The house I arrived at was white, somewhat yellowed by the elements. It was nestled on a large plot of land, maybe 10 acres. I was never a good judge of size, but I was definitely impressed. Maybe because I spent my days in my cab. I suppose anything would seem gigantic then. I had a rather unusual package to give this house, and as I walked to the steps using a dolly to haul this massive, heavy, and irregular-shaped box, the box tipped forward, the tape ripping open with the weight of the item. It was solid wood. It looked like oak, spruce maybe. I'm no wood expert, but I can say it was hollow inside. It had brass handles and a latch on the side. It looked like a coffin, but I couldn't be sure. Could just be some goth chick's bed. I wasn't asking questions. I mounted it back onto the dolly and heaved it up the 4 steps that went to the door. I was panting as I looked for a doorbell, but found none. I used instead the old knocker that stared at me, standing out from the heavy wooden door. I felt like I was in some Monsters TV episode or something. I wondered if I might be greeted with a camera shoved in my face, but I only saw a lovely lady. She was a bit taller than me, which didn't say much with me being 5'5", but she was gorgeous all the same. She had black long hair with the slightest peak of purple as the bottom layer, which only framed her face even better. She had the darkest blue eyes I'd ever seen, and she truly left me breathless for a moment. She spoke quietly. It took me a second to understand what she said. "Thanks. Been waiting on this hope chest forever." "This what? Oh, it's not a coffin?" I asked, almost jokingly. She frowned. "It's a hope chest. Quilts, blankets, and sometimes clothes are kept in them." "Pretty old-fashioned. I like it." I realized my attempts at flirting were falling short, so I relied on my hopefully likable nature. She shrugged, gesturing to the dolly. "Can you help me bring it in? I don't have anything to move it with." I paused. I wasn't supposed to go in people's houses, but she looked so embarrassed that I couldn't turn her down. We went to where she wanted it, and she thanked me profusely. "By the way, I have some deer meat in my basement's freezer. Would you like some as a thank you?" I'm ashamed to say that I was so enamored that I didn't use my horror movie knowledge. Never go into someone's basement. I went anyway, and made it to the bottom step, before I noticed this basement was absolutely awful. It looked burnt. It had collapsed shelves, piping hanging out of the floor above, and what smelled like a hellish mix of rot and mold. I felt sick to my stomach, and I dared not go to the freezer. I'd seen enough. I went back up the stairs to find it locked, and the lady was laughing at my panic.
"You're so stupid."
I pounded on the door, only hurting my hand in the process. I hissed with pain, going back down the stairs and staring at the windows that led outside. I had left my phone in my truck, so calling for help was out of the question. A smell of smoke started filling the room, and I noticed the plumes coming from the broken pipes. I saw a flicker of flame in the vents, and I grabbed a chunk of wood from the fallen shelves, slamming it into the window and forcing my body through despite getting cut up pretty bad. I booked it to my truck, not even bothering to pay attention to the woman racing behind me, yelling it was only a joke. I sped down the road, making it to a clinic in town, before exhaustion grabbed me, and I fainted in the lobby. I woke up sometime later with 12 stitches and my hand bandaged firmly. I learned they had to pry 20 shards of glass from me, and that I'd fractured the right side of my hand. I wouldn't be driving for a few weeks now. The police had been called and I gave my testimony. There was no sign of the woman, and nobody had lived there, allegedly, since 2004. They found the charred basement and the hope chest, but it turns out it was actually a coffin. And would have been my coffin if it hadn't been for the quick thinking and the windows. I was given vacation time until my hand healed, and I could definitely say I needed the break, with Gizmo on a nice lake somewhere we could fish. I hope I never run into her again. Oh, come on, guys. Don't go in people's basements even if they offer to show you something neat. I don't care if the lady's got beautiful eyes and gorgeous thighs. You stay out the door and go about your business. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can follow me on Twitter at DarkPrevails. Send me your scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit. Help us grow by following and reviewing Tales from the Break Room on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you. Also, if you don't mind, help us break the book charts by pre-ordering my upcoming new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon, or go to creepycampfirestories.com. You'll get a gorgeous hardcover book filled with atmospheric illustrations and tons of scary outdoor stories. Well, I will get one less nightmare, according to the demons, but we'll see. Until next time, everyone, it's time for yours truly to clock out. Because if I have to pay the government $1 more in taxes, oh God.